week with video, and this week I've been driving the 2025 Toyota GR Corolla, and this is the new Premium Plus trim, and this is the manual. I know the automatic is the big new thing for 2025, but Toyota sent me a manual here. I'll hopefully have an automatic at some point as well to do, but the manual I still adore, and if any of you have been watching this channel for any length of time, you probably know I love the GR Corolla. It's one of my favorite cars on the market currently. It is like my attainable dream car. I absolutely love this thing. So just be forewarned, there's going to be lots of me gushing about this car once again in this video. Now, I did a full review on this back in the fall of 2024. I took it around Charlotte Motor Speedway and did a bunch of other stuff and got some actual impressions with the new automatic, which is fantastic, by the way, and so good. But as far as the manual and what it's like to live with the 2025 GR Corolla, so we did get a little bit more torque here for 2025. You know, it goes up 22 pound-feet to 295 pound-feet now total. And that's certainly nice to have, but, you know, honestly, these already felt amazing as it is, and this just, you know, continues with that amazingness, and so good with the grip too. So I mean, there were some notable changes here for 2025 too. I already discussed some of this in my review, but in case you missed it, just as a brief summary here, you know, that new front bumper gives you better cooling. There's a sub radiator now that you can get here on these higher trims and come standard here on this Premium Plus that I'm in currently, which is basically the replacement for the Circuit Edition. We don't have the bigger rear wing of the Circuit Edition, but other than that, you know, it's basically all that same stuff. And you know, so that front bumper gives you better cooling. There's also various tweaks to the suspension, so it has less rear end squat, I believe, and just more stability overall. And, you know, I mean, again, I had no complaints with GR Corolla handling, so I'll take their word for it. I still, you know, would have to drive them back to back to really say the differences between the two. But it still is just, you know, really no complaints as far as, you know, the handling and all that. Now, as far as other things here, so the one big change that I didn't love here for 2025 was the fact that we now have a different little GR4 torque split selector here. So previously it went front to rear and then had a track mode in the middle, and then they reconfigured that here for 2025 to allow you to do less of the rear bias thing, which I personally don't love that they made that change, because that means that now if you want to have the max rear bias setting, which is 30 front, 70% of the power to the rear, you have to be in track mode, but then that only does it variably and can do that amount of power split if it deems that that's what you're wanting. But otherwise, really, you know, the only options are the normal mode, which is 60% front, 40 rear, and then the gravel mode, which is 50-50. And, you know, I mean, it's still fine. I just personally think I kind of prefer the 2024 because you have that ability. Not that I'm always putting in rear wheel drive all the time, but it's just, you know, fun to have that option. That was a really cool thing that they offered, and, you know, I just wish that they would have continued that. And another little acceleration here. Oh man, yeah, this thing feels so good to drive. So other things here about the GR Corolla. So, you know, we did get a few other little quality of life things, I guess you can call them, here on the inside. So for example, you know, we now have the IMT button, which gives you the auto rev match downshifts. That's now right next to the shifter instead of previously being over on the left-hand side of the steering wheel here. And, you know, I didn't mind going over to the left here. It's still, you know, within easy reach, and it's still a real button, but having it by the shifter certainly is nice, you know, for your pre-flight sequence here of, you know, pressing that button, you know, if you want to have that on. And also, like, the button finishes, they say, are new, so, you know, now you have, instead of the chrome kind of finish, you have this matte gray kind of finish, which is, you know, fine, but, you know, no one's buying this for the interior anyway, but they say it gives it a little bit of a sportier feel, and, you know, no difference to me. I also have to say too, you know, I would have liked to see them add a center armrest. We still don't have that, and as a result, there is no concealed storage in this vehicle aside from the glove box. There might be an aftermarket thing to kind of put your own in, but, you know, I just still, you know, this would have been the prime opportunity with this little mid-cycle refresh to add that, and, you know, instead we don't have that, unfortunately. But you know, the other thing, though, I have to say, too, is I've seen, you know, people complaining about the interior of the GR Corolla, and again, you aren't buying it for the interior, but I think that it kind of, isn't totally warranted. Because, you know, I'm sitting in this vehicle this week, I was like, you know, you have a padded dashboard. You know, I mean, Corolla interiors are actually pretty nice compared to the competition here in this segment, which still uses plenty of, you know, harder plastics in many cases. Now, I certainly think a Civic Type R interior is still nicer, but this isn't, again, as bad as I think everyone makes it out to be, in my opinion at least. And having, you know, padded everything, you know, you have the contrast stitching here. Obviously, you know, it's still a Corolla, but it's, I think, actually very nice, and I have no complaints with the interior. And honestly, you know, speaking of this interior, you know, this one, as tested, by the way, with the manual, is just over $48,000. And, you know, that is a little bit pricey, you know, and that's where I think, honestly, the best value for these is still the Core model with its same, all the same fun, you know, but just with, you know, a lower starting price, you know, still starting at about $40,000. And now they come standard with the front and rear diffs. Previously that was an option, now that's standard, and that's great too, because, you know, now you don't have to worry about making sure, especially on the used market, that you're picking one with the right options there. So they all have all the same performance now and all that. And you know, the cloth seats are still fine. They're still the nice sporty seats. You know, you lose out on the heated steering wheel and the heated seats and the Qi wireless charging pad. I think all three of those things, especially with a cloth interior, are not big deals. And, you know, sure, the chopped carbon roof is a nice thing to have, but there's really not a ton that you get, you know, for that big jump. And so for that reason, I would just say, you know, stick to the Core, you know, or that, again, that mid-grade premium trim is also, you know, nice to have as an option here too, if you want some of the stuff, but not everything. But yeah, I think at 40 grand, this makes a lot of sense. But, you know, the real thing that I think is actually kind of a curveball to me is that, at least as of right now, again, we don't know how pricing may or may not change due to tariffs, but as of the end of May here in 2025, a Golf R is basically the same price. And I think that's kind of the biggest problem with this car. Personally, I would take this because I think this is more fun to drive. There's more emotion here. It's got more character than Golf R. And when you're buying something like this, I think character does really matter. But if you're looking to check boxes and get the most stuff per dollar, the Golf R for the same money gives you an extra 28 horsepower. It gives you leather, heated, and ventilated seats. Now, it doesn't come with a manual anymore here for the Mark 8.5. You have the dual clutch automatic only, and I haven't driven the Mark 8.5 yet, but I know with the Mark 8, I complained about how the dual clutch just always wanted a hypermile and was not, you know, a very fun transmission unless you were in sport mode or paddle shifting it. Otherwise, it was just a complete bore, and actually really pissed me off because in normal mode, I just could not get the responses out of it that I wanted, but sport was too aggressive. So, you know, and I actually think that Toyota does a better automatic now. There's a torque converter, so it's smoother in stop and go traffic, and it's just as quick in my opinion, and, you know, really well done. So I think the Toyota is still better, but again, if stuff like ventilated seats is important to you and having, you know, more premium interior is important to you, you know, I could see how, you know, this could potentially, you know, lose out in the comparisons there. And the one other thing I will say about the GR Corolla that I actually don't love is the exhaust. It's a little drony. It's not quite as bad as VBWRX is, but, you know, especially on a cold start, you know, when you're idling, it is, you know, a little drony for the exhaust. And the exhaust also doesn't sound particularly great. I mean, you have some great induction note, and I love the, especially the little whistle you get and the little, you know, blow-off valve kind of sound there, recirculating valve, whatever it is, you know. But I love the turbo sounds and the whooshy sounds, and that's all great, and I like, you know, the way this little 3-cylinder sounds. But you know, I just do think that some of the others do exhaust a little bit better, and I'd love to see them do some kind of active exhaust here for these at some point. But there's, of course, always the aftermarket, and I'm sure there's some great exhaust options out there that give you, you know, maybe a little bit less drone and also give you a little bit better sound. So that's something you could probably fix, and I'm sure a lot of people do price swap exhaust on these anyways. But, you know, just factory, you know, the Golf R does offer an Akrapovic exhaust, titanium one, that you can get on those, and probably, you know, is going to be a little bit of a better sound than this. The only thing I will say is, you know, I don't love the practicality here in this because, you know, one of probably the tiniest hatchback you know, in modern times here. Not a lot of trunk space, and this one also has this optional rear brace for $720 that I've never seen or heard about before. I guess that's, you know, for extra rigidity on the track or whatever. You know, I don't know, but just another thing that does hurt your practicality, because then, you know, you can still fold the rear seats, but obviously it's just going to infringe on your space there, you know, if you do actually want to pass things through to the back seat. So, you know, I'd love to see, you know, for a second generation of this, it actually having a more usable hatch, or better yet, offer us the touring wagon version that, you know, the other parts of the world get for the regular Corolla, and, you know, put the GR stuff in that. I think that could be amazing, as well as we're seeing, you know, other companies finding a lot of success with performance wagons here in America. I'm hoping that, you know, maybe that's something that's considered for, you know, a next generation, assuming a next generation even happens. You know, that's the other thing. Corolla is, you know, getting towards the end of its lifespan, I'm sure. I mean, we just again got this little refresh for this year, but I don't expect these to last much longer in this current form, because Corolla has been around, I believe, since about 2018 now. So, you know, it's getting ready for, I'm sure, a new generation, and so, you know, I'm hoping that this stuff continues, but I'm just enjoying the simplicity, the wonderful purity of this car. Yeah, I absolutely love this thing to death. And, you know, especially now, again, May of 2025 here, with Subaru increasing prices on WRXs, a base WRX is now like $38,000 or $39,000, and you can get this for $40,000, you know, in its base form. And this has, you know, more horsepower. I know that the VB engine is better for modding and stuff. So, you know, if you're going to go ahead and try and do 500 horsepower, you know, maybe the WRX is a better way to go. But if you're just looking for a good car out of the box without having to mess with it to make it good, GR Corolla is better out of the box, hands down, in my opinion. You have the, you know, rear diff and stuff that you don't even get in the WRX anymore, like you used to get in the STIs. You know, you have it here in this, and that's why I've said before, I think the GR Corolla is really the spiritual successor to the STI in many ways that Subaru refuses to make. And I'm so grateful that Toyota continues to make this, and that it is as phenomenal as it is. And these changes for 2025, you know, only make it better, in my opinion. And it's great that we now have the automatic option for those who, you know, couldn't deal with the manual for whatever reason. So yeah, that's really all of my thoughts here on GR Corolla. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Toyota for providing me here with this vehicle to review for you guys today. Yeah, thank you all very much for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe to keep these videos coming, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.